Welcome to New Mexico Black Rifle Operators Union. I'm your host, Sean. In the 2A world, we're still in the same fights. I was looking for something new that would kind of be used for this podcast to try to give you a news update. And what I found was actually kind of horrifying. The Department of Homeland Security has issued new guidelines for the people that are the enemy, is what the guidelines are from. And this is from their Twitter, their official Twitter and their official websites. And what it says is the Department of Homeland Security Office of Intelligence Analysis Right-Wing Extreme Report March 9th was with supplementary Domestic Extremism Lexicon April 09 classifies individuals as extremists if they identify or identified with one or more of the following, and here are what they are. Military veterans who fought in foreign wars and are disgruntled about takeover of the U.S. Anti-war individual groups. It doesn't highlight any more than that. Tax resistance movements. So anyone who's a libertarian who believes like I do that taxation is theft. Militias. Members opposed most federal and state laws, regulation, authority, and firearm laws regulation. Alternative media, which provide interpretations of events and issues that differ radically from the presented in mass media outlets. So anyone like Tim Pool or anyone else who is not on the news, the old school legacy news, is considered an enemy. Opponents of open border policies, defined as highly critical of the U.S. government's response to illegal immigration. So anyone who doesn't like what's currently happening at the border is an enemy. Single issues. Groups or individuals who focus on single issues or causes such as animal rights, environmentalism, and anti-abortion. And anyone in any patriot movement. The buzzwords that they're worried about you using. Frequent references to the Constitution, support of third-party candidates. So in other words, if you're tired of the status quo and are willing to break ranks and vote against Republicans or Democrats, that's you. Support for an audit of the Federal Reserve. So if you advocate for any of these things, you're the enemy. This is the lexicon that they're worried about. Opposition to a carbon tax. So being from Southwest United States and the Northwest New Mexico, we're heavily into oil and gas here. I don't know very many people in this area that are very pro getting rid of fossil fuels. We believe in fossil fuels because we know that energy is the future. Energy is life in a lot of ways. And to say that you are anti-carbon tax because you want to keep your job or your way of life puts you in that lexicon of the enemy that they are watching for. Opposition to U.S. submissions to the United Nations and or the World Health Organization. So after COVID, most of us started looking at WHO, the World Health Organization, and wondering where their loyalties lie and why we're a part of them. At least I did. And opposition to the United Nations, well, you're going to see more opposition to the United Nations because you also, if you paid attention to the Sound of Freedom and you looked at the research that's going on in that type of world, you find out the United Nations is one of the most corrupt, child-abusing entities on planet Earth. They've been known to molest kids. They've been known to terrorize local communities. And they are all doing this under the guise of peacemakers when they go to the areas that they're supposed to be deployed to. So what does this land us into? This is ratcheting up the rhetoric that Democrats and leftists like to use against anyone who opposes their will, is the best way I could put that. The fact that there are people on planet Earth that don't agree 100% with any of this stuff, or their byline, when I say the leftist byline, and even to some degree the right where they're at. They were trying to pass some amendments to help get. I think it was Marjorie Taylor Greene, which was trying to pass something to try to get pilots rehired if they had didn't comply with the COVID vaccine. And 79 Republicans sided with the Democrats to keep that from happening. So as I see it, left, right, same crap, different piles. So why would we support the stuff that we have seen with our own eyes that is anti-American, anti-2A, anti-human? To tell you that you need to get rid of fossil fuels and not have a direct replacement, you're calling for the death of billions. Because without fossil fuels, farming doesn't happen. You need tractors to harvest. You need pesticides and fertilizers to get higher crop yields. So this seems very much in line with what we see in the world today, a very anti-human stand. What I mean by that is, if you look at what's going on in the world, there seems to be this depopulation agenda, with Kamala Harris even coming out and saying that we should probably reduce our population. And they say that was a joke, that was a faux pas, that was an accident, and that's not what she actually meant. I'm of a volition that she actually let slip something that she has been hearing in closed doors, behind closed doors. And that this needs to be watched for, and you need to be very cognizant of these issues as they're starting to come into play. Now, why would I mention this on a 2A podcast? Because this is all about 2A and gun stuff. Is because in our community, we are a community of former veterans. The 2A is very pro-veteran. Wounded Warriors are supported by a lot of the 2A community. And there's a lot of veterans that have came back from the last war that we had, the Forever War on Terror, and have become disgruntled and said that this is probably not what we should be doing. We should not be going to war for the sake of going to war. We need an actual reason, and we need a clear, defined goal before we go deploy thousands of troops again. Having done this for 20-some-odd years and not getting anything out of it other than pissing off a lot of people and killing a lot of civilians in other foreign countries. Now, the militia groups. Now, the militia groups have been around, since Waco. They've been around in the United States since its inception. The idea was that the militia would be the people's army itself, not the regular military, but one that could be called upon if we need to defend the homeland. So anyone who is willing to get into a militia or start up a militia to try to augment the military or the police force in case of bad things that have happened, and we've seen them in real life. Case in point, the riots of during the Summer of Love. That's when a lot of militia groups started getting more prominence, and they are gaining prominence now because we're seeing in real time that two-tier justice system is favoring one side very heavily. And that's what usually starts rebellion or sparks the idea of rebellion. Now, what's interesting to me about the Department of Homeland Security going after alternative media is they're trying to silence voices since they've already been found out with the Twitter files that we know the federal government has been trying to infiltrate social media groups or get with social media tech giants and silence opposition to the mainstream narrative. It happened with COVID. It's happened with the Trump dossier. The truth eventually comes out, and it has its day. Thus, why this is coming out. On the heels of this post or these things coming out from the Department of Homeland Security, there's also something that came out where where more documents have been showing up about the corruption of our current administration, that they actually may be foreign agents. And anything around that is being silenced. And why is it being silenced? Because it corrupts the mainstream media's narrative and stops them. The same time that comes to light, there's new evidence that Fox News, who is supposed to be the conservative bastion, is actually allowing their employees to contribute to things like the Satanic Temple or to Planned Parenthood. That's antithetical to a conservative news group. But we all know that. Fox has controlled opposition, and it has been for years. There's a lot of conservatives that have started watching OWN, which I would say has its own problems similar to this. But it shows how deeply the corruption of our institutions are. That why should you trust mainstream media, which Fox News would be considered one of those, when they're supporting causes that are antithetical to what the conservative causes are? And I'm speaking to the conservatives, which I was once one of those, because they're the ones that still kind of toe that party line that we have to resurrect the republic. We have to fix it. Rather than realizing that the republic is kind of gone, we need to think about after effects now. Can we fix it? Absolutely. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of people, and a lot of people of character. And that's where I'm wondering if we actually have them anymore. You know, I don't see politicians in the same black and white that I once used to. There was a point in time I would get behind a politician just because they backed one issue, and that issue is the 2A. And now I can say without a doubt that they're all full of crap, because any person that has ever went in to back the 2A, when they get into power, they end up reversing their course and going the opposite direction. And we need to be very cognizant of that now. As Sarah was saying, where's the line? Where do we fight, right? And how do we fight? I think the best way to fight for most Americans is to check out. And what I mean by check out is to simply put peaceful noncompliance. If this law is unjust in your eyes, whatever it is, don't comply. With that, what happens is then they have to go out and try to arrest you. They can't arrest you if you've done nothing else wrong. And if you're not on one of these media sites trying to espouse how you've broken one of these laws, there's really no reason for them to come after you. This is how we win. You make them irrelevant. You know, we basically make the federal government and all government entities that are against us as irrelevant as possible. And that means we're going to have some uncomfortable things that we do, especially if you're on the side of law and order, or you think you're on the side of law and order, and now you're having to do such things that you're just not going to talk about what you own anymore, or what you do, who you're with, or where you meet. We have to start thinking in those terms because we're in that space now. They've proven time and time again that if you are vocal enough or large enough, or you have a large enough platform, and you espouse one of these ideals that they don't agree with, they will come after you. They will silence you. They will debank you. They will try to do everything they can to come after you. And that's the sad case of the United States right now. On sadder news, I don't know how many of you guys were ever a big fan of Shooting USA, which is a TV show that was on pretty regularly, at least once a week. A legend from Guns and Ammo, Jim Scouten, passed away this week. Now, Jim Scouten, I remember him in his deep baritone voice when he was talking about, make my whatever for Guns and Ammo and for Shooting USA. I don't know exactly why he passed away, probably cancer, but I could just imagine how sad it is. Well, I know how sad it is because this guy was definitely a pro 2A advocate. He was definitely all in for the gun world, and we mourn his loss because he was a great advocate for the Second Amendment. As for the other issues, it's sad every time I think we're winning, and I still think we are. There's a lot of white pill moments that are happening right now that you have to look at, and you have to look at it optimistically. The court cases that are lining up right now, Mock v. Garland, Vanderstock v. Garland, all of these kind of lead to the erosion of the ATF's power. That coupled with a couple of rulings from the EPA about Chevron deference, that stops them from being able to arbitrarily make a rule. These are all lining up for us to have some big wins. However, what happens with the Justice Department once these happen? They're already going after Roe v. Wade again, trying to codify that with an amendment. You see Newsom trying to put the 28th Amendment out. I still think that him having the option or having the chances of passing the 28th Amendment are slim, unless we have enough turncoats that actually side with him instead of against him. Now, I've talked to a lot of people in my passing through life and doing what I do, and there's a lot of fans of Gavin Newsom that actually are completely moronic, that have never looked at his policies. They only look at what they've seen on the media. Gavin Newsom is the guy that was caught at the French Laundry having a party during the height of COVID, where he had every mom and pop business shut down, and no one could do anything in California without masks. This is the state that actually filled in skate parks with sand, stopped people from going to the beach, which we later found out that being out in the sun was probably the best cure for COVID, or that getting vitamin D would actually help you against your COVID if you got it. But that didn't matter. It was controlling people. And that's what COVID to me kind of showed, was that people were willing to be controlled for a long time, myself included. And that needs to stop. We need to realize where we're at. Now, my anarchist friends who have kind of guided me to anarchism have long been right about what the federal government has done, and it took something like this for me to actually see that. So I hope you guys have a great weekend, or had a great weekend. It's still too hot here, in my opinion, to go out shooting, more so because I don't want to start a fire by having a spark from something I shoot end up starting a wildfire somewhere, because there's enough of those in Canada and around other parts of the state that I kind of think it's over 100 degrees. It has been for a week or 2 weeks here now, which is normal for New Mexico. The climate change people will say that, oh no, we're all frying. When in reality, New Mexico and the Southwest has always had to worry about July and August, at least the first 2 weeks of August and the last 2 weeks of July, because that is when it's always the hottest. We're about to start getting rain, though. How do I know that? Connie Mack World Series has started in northwest New Mexico in Farmington. It's a baseball series, and it never fails during Connie Mack that it starts to rain. So with that, we will see rain shortly, I hope. Maybe it'll cool down our area a little bit. It's so hot that taking a dog out for a walk is probably a bad plan unless it's after 8 or 9 o'clock at night. But is it because of the carbon in the air? No. It's because it's summer in the Southwest. Yes, it's oppressive. It has always been oppressive. I don't remember in my lifetime living in the Southwest that July into August didn't suck a little bit, if you're kind of like me that likes the colder temperatures. That said, the climate scare tactics that are coming out are hilarious. The reason why it's hilarious is because they were literally saying people would die if they were out in 94-degree weather. Well, most of the time in New Mexico in the summer, it's 94, 95, somewhere in there. You learn that you're supposed to stay hydrated. You learn to dress appropriately and to use sunblock, but it's not going to kill you. Now, if you're in it all the time, that's a possibility. If you don't have access to water, that's a possibility. But again, these are not rare things in the Southwest. We've always had this type of climate. And for it to have a little bit of a hot snap, well, that's not unheard of in the Southwest. Neither is getting feet of snow the beginning of October. Why? It isn't because of climate change. It's because of the climate that's already here. Now, does man-made climate change exist? Don't know. Honestly, I don't trust the statistics because they're paid for by someone. And anytime you pay for something, you're going to get exactly what you want. So, screw the climate guys. They're the ones that are usually anti-2A anyway. I think it's very cool that the quote-unquote silent majority has struck again with Jason Aldean's song. I spoke about that Thursday. So Jason Aldean's song came out, and he says, try this in a small town. And I've been saying that for years, that if you saw an Antifa guy here lighting a Molotov cocktail and getting ready to throw it at a business, that someone would stop them, and probably with lethal force, and would probably get away with it because they would see that as self-defense of themselves and the business, because we are small town enough to where we gather around our people and our community and we protect it. And that's the problem we have right now when it comes to that Back the Blue, is we still have a good chunk of white hat cops and sheriff's officers that are actually still trying to do good. So it's really hard to come out against them knowing that you've seen them do good stuff. You know, I've seen sheriffs alongside the road changing tires, sheriff's deputies, for people. You know, you don't see that in New York, okay? But at the same time, I hope that they stay on our side, because we're at that point where we need to start picking and choosing who's going to be in our group. Like, share, subscribe, be great.
I can't let it slide. My politics are rather controversial. Who would have thought that I ain't catching all slack and I have enemies on my boss?